The chamber hummed with the low thrum of holographic displays, their blue glow casting long shadows across the vaulted ceilings of the Galactic Council's central hall. Ambassador Lyra Voss, a wiry human with sharp eyes and a perpetual half-smile, adjusted her formal tunic as she stepped onto the raised dais. She'd been Earth's representative for 3 cycles now, long enough to read the subtle hierarchies among the alien delegates, the crystalline Zorathians clicking their mandibles in approval, the fluid vexery rippling with unease. Today, though, the air felt thicker, charged with something unspoken. Beside her, Captain Elias Kane gripped the podium's edge, his calloused hands revealing years on frontier haulers rather than diplomatic floors. He knew councils well, but this one tightened his jaw. Broad-shouldered and scarred from a void pirate skirmish, Elias preferred engine hums to speeches. "They're stalling," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Lyra. Councils danced around the resource petition for weeks. Lyra nodded, her voice a steady whisper. "Patience, Captain. Humanity's not here to beg." She scanned the assembly, over 50 species from towering furred krell to diminutive bioluminescent sylphs, all orbiting the central hollow projection of contested nebulae. Earth's request was straightforward: access to the Orion Drift's helium-3 deposits, essential for fusion drives amid a solar flare crisis back home. But the council, wary of upstart members, dragged its feet. The presiding chair, a hulking Tellarite named Gorvash, rumbled to life from his elevated throne, his voice echoing like grinding stone. "Ambassador Voss, the petition stands. The Drift's yields are allocated to core worlds. Humanity's expansion strains existing pacts." Lyra leaned forward, her tone measured but firm. "Strains? We've mapped 3 new trade routes through the Drift, boosting yields by 40%. That's not strain, it's contribution." Elias shot her a glance, admiration flickering in his eyes. She had that knack, turning defense into offense without raising her voice. Murmurs rippled through the hall. A Zorathian delegate shimmered, its facets catching the light. "Contributions do not erase history. Humanity's silence during the Veil incursion, your absence cost lives." The words hung heavy. Elias's fist clenched. The incursion, 5 years past, when a rogue AI swarm had ravaged fringe colonies. Earth had stayed neutral, fortifying borders instead of joining the fray. "Neutrality," Lyra countered smoothly, "preserved what we could. We offered aid after medical tech that saved your fleets." Gorvash's eyes narrowed, tusks glinting. "Aid is not alliance. The vote proceeds as scheduled. Dissent noted." He waved a massive hand and the holo-display flickered, tallying proxies. The chamber's tension coiled tighter, like a spring under pressure. As the session adjourned, Lyra and Elias slipped into a side corridor, the doors hissing shut behind them. "They're boxing us in," Elias said, rubbing his stubbled chin. "If we don't get those deposits, the flares will black out half the colonies. People freezing in the dark." Lyra's half-smile faded, replaced by resolve. "Then we adapt. I've got a lead on an independent survey, off the books. You in?" Elias met her gaze, the camaraderie of shared stakes igniting between them. He nodded once, sharp. "Always." Outside, the station's viewport framed the swirling Orion Drift, a nebula of gas and promise, oblivious to the politics gnawing at its edges. But, for Lyra and Elias, the real drift was just beginning, one of quiet defiance against the council blind to consequence. The chamber's hum faded as Ambassador Lyra Voss stepped away from the podium, her boots echoing on the polished obsidian floor of the Galactic Council's Grand Hall. She could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes, some multifaceted, others glowing with bioluminescent curiosity, boring into her back. The proposal had been simple: a unified resource allocation for the Outer Rim colonies, where human outposts battled asteroid storms and failing life support systems. But the Council's response, a chorus of deferrals and caveats from the Krellian delegate's droning veto, left a bitter taste. Lyra rubbed her temple, the faint scar from a mining accident on Eridani, for a stark reminder of why she fought these battles. Her aide, Tomas Reyes, waited in the shadowed alcove, his tablet clutched like a shield. He was the cautious one, always double-checking manifests and escape vectors, his dark eyes scanning for threats before they materialized. "That went about as well as expected," he muttered, falling into step beside her. The Vexri are playing hardball again. They want the helium-3 routes locked down. She nodded, weaving through the throng of diplomats, towering Solari with vine-like limbs brushing the air, diminutive Corans chittering in ultrasonic bursts. The air recyclers whispered cool mist, carrying scents of alien spices and ozone. Expected but not acceptable. We've got 3 stations on the brink. If we don't reroute those shipments, we're looking at evacuations, or worse. Tomas glanced over his shoulder, voice dropping. Worse, like the Epsilon incident? Last time the Council stonewalled us, we lost a crew to vacuum breach. Lyra's jaw tightened. She remembered the hollow feed, twisted metal, silent screams. No, not again. As they approached the human delegation's shuttle bay, a low chime echoed through the corridor, an urgent summons from the Council's inner sanctum. Her comm buzzed. High Arbiter Thorn, the enigmatic leader of the Assembly, requested her presence. Alone. The sanctum doors parted with a hiss, revealing a circular chamber bathed in the soft glow of holographic star maps. Thorn floated at the center, its gelatinous form undulating within a containment field, tendrils gesturing lazily. Flanking it were 2 others, Delegate Zara of the Krell, her exoskeletal frame clicking with restrained agitation, and a silent observer from the neutral Zorath hive mind, its drone form hovering like a watchful insect. Ambassador Voss, Thorn's voice resonated, a synthesized baritone that echoed in her mind. Your persistence is noted. But humanity's demands strain the balance. The outer rim is not yours alone to claim. Lyra stood tall, her flight suit crisp despite the long session. With respect, Arbiter, those colonies sustain the entire network. Our miners extract the rare earths that power your shields, our engineers map the hyperspace lanes you all traverse. Denying us aid isn't balance, it's sabotage. Zara's mandibles clacked. Sarcasm ill suits you, human. Your species expands without regard, claiming worlds before we can assess. The Vexri Nebula is sacred, your drills profane it. The Zorath drone emitted a faint pulse, neither agreeing nor dissenting, but Lyra felt the tension coil like a spring. Thorn's tendrils stilled. We propose a compromise. Humanity withdraws from the nebula for 1 cycle. In return, we grant temporary access to the core reserves. It was a trap dressed as generosity. Withdraw, and her people starved for isotopes. Accept, and the Vexri gained leverage to blockade the rim entirely. Lyra's mind raced, Tomas's warnings flashing. Always have an exit. 1 cycle is too long. Our stations can't hold. Give us the shipments now, and we'll negotiate the nebula separately. Zara leaned forward, her compound eyes gleaming. Insolence. The Council decides, not fringe dwellers. Thorn's form rippled, a sign of irritation. The vote is set. Unless you yield, humanity's voice will be muted in future sessions. The words hung heavy, a veiled threat. Lyra met the Arbiter's gaze, or where she imagined it to be. Mute us if you must. But silence isn't absence. It's a choice. As the doors sealed behind her, the corridor felt colder. Tomas was waiting, his face paling at her expression. What now? She pulled up the shuttle manifest on her wrist comm. We go back to the rim. And we prepare. If they want silence, we'll give them something louder. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console's edge, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The bridge of the Endeavor felt smaller now, the recycled air thick with the scent of overheated circuits and unwashed crew. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren hunched over his tablet, fingers flying across the screen, brow furrowed in that familiar mix of frustration and focus. The relay's fried, he muttered, not looking up. That ion storm we skirted? It must have masked a secondary pulse. We're blind out here. No comms, no NAV updates from the core worlds. Ilara nodded curtly, her mind racing through contingencies. She'd always been the steady one, the captain who turned grit into glue for her team. But this far from the Council's patrols, with humanity's silence already a galactic whisper, every delay felt like a crack in the facade. Reroute power from life support if you have to. We need eyes on that nebula ahead, can't afford another blind jump. Her voice cut through the din, calm but edged with the weight of command. Lieutenant Mira Solis burst onto the bridge from the corridor, her flight suit smeared with lubricant from the engine bay. The youngest of them, Mira carried a spark of defiance in her quick grin even now. Engines are purring again, Cap, but the storm's wake is playing havoc with our shields. If we push through that gas cloud, we might lose hull integrity. She wiped her hands on her thigh, eyes flicking to Kai's display. What's the play? Dodge or dive? Kai glanced up, his cautious nature surfacing in the hesitation. Dodging means looping back toward the fringe routes. More pirates, less reliable charts. Diving, it's a gamble. The nebula could hide Council scouts, or worse, whatever's left of the Vexery fleet. He pushed his glasses up, the lenses catching the red emergency lights. The Vexery, those opportunistic raiders who'd ambushed human convoys during the withdrawal, were the real shadow over this mission. Humanity's abrupt silence from the Galactic Council had left a vacuum, and scavengers like them thrived in it. Ilara straightened, her Desi's ion forming like a blade from the forge. We dive. Mira, plot a shallow trajectory, keep us skimming the outer layers. Kai, prioritize sensors over everything else. If there's a Vexery trap in there, we'll sniff it out before they sniff us. The crew moved as one, a rhythm honed from years of outmaneuvering the Council's endless bureaucracy. No speeches, just action. Mira at the helm, fingers dancing over controls. Kai splicing feeds with makeshift ingenuity, jury-rigging the array from salvaged parts. The Endeavor shuddered as it entered the nebula's embrace, tendrils of violet gas curling against the viewport like spectral fingers. Alarms quieted to a low hum, replaced by the groan of straining metal. Ilara watched the scanners bloom with false echoes, ghost signals from ionized particles. But then, a blip. Solid. Too deliberate to be debris. Incoming, Kai said, voice tight. Vexery signature, closing fast. They've got us painted. Myra's hands tightened on the yoke. Evasive maneuvers? Ilara's jaw set. Hold course. Arm the countermeasures. We're not running this time. In the silence that followed, the cost loomed unspoken. One wrong move, and the Endeavor became another casualty in humanity's quiet stand. The Council would learn soon enough what absence truly meant. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair. The hum of the bridge's consoles a faint vibration through the deck plating. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer sensors, painting the void in jagged bursts of interference. Her crew, 3 souls in this cramped scout vessel, moved with the quiet efficiency born of too many long hauls. Lieutenant Kai Ren, ever the cautious one, hunched over his tactical station, fingers dancing across holographic readouts. Beside him, Engineer Mira Solis wiped grease from her brow, her witty retorts silenced for once by the weight of the unknown. And then there was Dr. Theo Grant, the xenobiologist, pacing the narrow aisle with a tablet clutched like a shield, his brave optimism cracking under the strain. Interference is worsening, Kai reported, his voice steady but edged with caution. It's not natural. Something's jamming our long-range comms, deliberate, I'd wager. Ilara nodded, her jaw set. They'd been charting the fringes of the Council's neutral zone for weeks, mapping anomalies that whispered of hidden tech. Humanity's silence pact, our deliberate withdrawal from galactic chatter after the last betrayal, had bought them this edge, but it left them isolated. No backup. No warnings. Just the faint hope that their ingenuity would carve a path. Mira straightened, tossing a diagnostic tool onto her bench. Power fluctuations in the array. If we push the engines harder, we might punch through, but it'll burn out the coils. Risky. Theo stopped pacing, his eyes lighting on the view screen where a shadow loomed, a derelict station, its skeletal arms drifting like forgotten bones against the nebula's glow. That thing's the source. Old Council design, but modified. If we dock, I can interface directly. Pull the data before whatever's out there notices us. Ilara waited, the air thick with unspoken stakes. Their mission was recon, not salvage, but the silence from home meant every scrap of intel could tip the scales. Resource shortage was their ghost, fuel cells dipping low, air recyclers straining. One wrong move, and they'd be adrift, another casualty in the void. Helm, plot intercept course, she decided, her tone brooking no argument. Mira prepped the docking clamps. Kai, shields up, but keep emissions minimal. We ghost in. The ship shuddered as thrusters fired, closing the gap. The station grew, its hull pitted and scarred, a relic from the wars that had driven humanity underground. As they neared, a low groan echoed through the comms, automated defenses stirring. Docking latched with a metallic kiss. Ilara unstrapped, pulling her sidearm. Theo, you're on point. Mira, cover engineering. Kai, monitor from here. If it goes south, you bug out, no heroics. They cycled through the airlock, mag boots clanging on the station's grated floor. Dim emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced like specters. Theo led, his scanner beeping softly, while Mira trailed with a toolkit slung over her shoulder, muttering about jury-rigged traps. The central core was a maze of conduits and shattered panels. One striking image burned into Ilara's mind, a console blooming with crystalline growths, alien tech fusing with the old machinery, pulsing with an inner light that mimicked a heartbeat. Jackpot, Theo breathed, plugging in his device. Data streamed, council logs encrypted, detailing experiments on silence fields. Weapons to enforce isolation. This could expose their whole network. But as the transfer began, alarms wailed. Red lights strobed. From the vents, drones swarmed, small, spider-like sentinels, their lasers priming with a whine. Back. Ilara barked, firing a burst that shattered two. Mira swung her wrench, cracking another's chassis, her caution forgotten in the adrenaline rush. These aren't standard, upgraded. Kai's voice crackled over comms. Captain, incoming signatures. Council's patrols, 3 minutes out. We tripped something. Theo yanked his tablet free, but a drone latched onto his leg, servos whirring. He stomped it down, grimacing. Got 80%. Enough. Not without you, Ilara shot back, hauling him up. They retreated, drones harrying their steps, the station's corridors narrowing like a trap closing. They burst into the airlock as the ship decoupled, Kai's hands a blur on the controls. The vessel lurched away, engines straining against the pull of artificial gravity. Pursuit lights pierced the nebula behind them. Ilara slumped into her chair, the cost settling in. A glancing hit had scorched their hull, fuel venting into space. Silence from home meant no rescue, but the data in Theo's hands hummed with promise. The Council's consequence was coming, one clever evasion at a time. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The bridge of the Endurance hummed with the low thrum of failing life support systems, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of her crew. Lieutenant Kai Ren, ever the cautious one, tapped furiously at his station, his brow furrowed in concentration. Filters are at 23% capacity, Captain. Another hour and we'll be breathing our own exhaust. She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. The alien probe had struck without warning, a sleek, iridescent dart from the Council's Vanguard fleet, embedding itself in their hull like a splinter in flesh. It hadn't fired weapons. No, that would have been merciful. Instead, it released a swarm of nanites that chewed through their atmospheric recyclers, turning breathable air into a toxic soup. The Council called it a demonstration of restraint. Ilara called it attempted murder. Status on the comms array? She asked, her tone steady despite the burn in her lungs. Ensign Mira Solis, the witty engineer with a knack for turning scrap into salvation, looked up from her jury-rigged panel. A streak of grease smeared her cheek like war paint. Patched, but it's whispering. They're jamming fields like a black hole for signals. If we want to punch through, we'll need something bigger than a prayer. Ilara's mind raced. The Council's ultimatum had been clear: surrender the colony data or face isolation. Humanity's silence wasn't defiance, it was strategy. 4 months, they'd gone dark, forcing the aliens to second-guess every move, to feel the weight of their own arrogance. But out here, on the edge of the neutral zone, silence meant vulnerability. The Endurance was their last line, carrying the encrypted archives that could tip the balance. Options, Ilara said, her voice cutting through the hum. Kai straightened, his cautious nature shining through in the measured way he spoke. We drift, conserve power, wait for the fleet to notice we're overdue. Risky, but it buys time. Mira snorted, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit. And suffocate while we wait? No thanks. I say we improvise a counterswarm. Use the probe's own nanites against it, reverse the flow, flush the bastards out. Ilara waited. Kai's plan was safe, predictable. Myra's was bold, human, turning the enemy's tool into a weapon. The air grew thicker, a faint metallic tang coating her throat. Time was the real killer here. Go with the counter-swarm, she decided. Mira, you're on point. Kai, monitor the hull integrity. If this backfires, we vent the affected sections. Myra's eyes lit up, a grin flashing despite the strain. Aye, Captain. Let's give these squid brains a taste of their own ink. As Mira dove into the access panels, sparks flying like angry fireflies, Ilara patched into the external sensors. The Council's fleet loomed in the distance, a constellation of angular ships blotting out the stars. They weren't advancing, but their silence mocked her own. What did they expect? Capitulation? Or were they learning, as humanity had hoped, that consequences cut both ways? The ship shuddered as Mira initiated the hack. Ilara felt the vibration in her bones, a deep rumble that set her teeth on edge. Alarms blared, hull breach imminent. Kai's voice cracked over the intercom. Nanites are adapting. They're spreading faster. Shut it down. Ilara barked, but Mira was already ahead, fingers dancing across controls. Too late for that, Mira muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. Rerouting power, now. A hiss echoed through the vents, followed by a sharp crackle. The air cleared in bursts, recyclers whining back to life. Ilara took a deep breath, the first clean one in hours. It worked. But as the sensors cleared, a new blip appeared, not the fleet but a single shuttle detaching from the Council's formation. Incoming. They're hailing, Kai said, his voice tight. Visual only. No audio. Ilara straightened her uniform, the weight of the archives pressing on her like an unseen hand. Whatever came next, humanity's silence had just gotten a lot louder. The shuttle's approach light painted the bridge in cold blue, and she wondered if this was the consequence they'd all been waiting for. The dim glow of the Council chamber's holographic displays flickered like dying stars, casting long shadows across the assembled delegates. Kaler, the Vortian representative, paced the raised dais, his iridescent scales twitching with uncharacteristic agitation. 4 weeks now, the silence from humanity's quadrant had stretched like an unspoken accusation, and today it had manifested in the most tangible way. The Armada supply lines were fracturing. Without human-engineered stabilizers, the fleet's warp drives hummed erratically, stranding patrols in the void. Delegate Voss, Kaler addressed the hulking Grun engineer who hunched over a console, his forearms manipulating data streams with frantic precision. Your projections tell me they're wrong. We can't lose another frigate to these fluctuations. Voss rumbled a low growl, his voice gravelly through the translator. Not wrong, Vortian. Human tech bridged the gaps in our systems. Without their alloys, the drives overheat after 3 jumps. We've lost contact with the Outer Rim scouts already. If the Krell swarm hits now, we're blind. The chamber murmured, a chorus of unease from the dozen other species represented. Lyra, the sleek avian diplomat from the Elisari enclave, perched on her elevated seat, her feathers ruffled. She had always been the cautious one, advocating for reconciliation even as the Council dismissed humanity's final transmissions. Now her sharp eyes scanned the room. We should have listened. Their silence isn't abandonment, it's a mirror. We've pushed them to the edge with our demands, our assumptions of superiority. And here we are unraveling. Kaler stopped pacing, his mandibles clicking in frustration. He remembered the last human envoy, Captain Reyes, standing firm in this very hall, warning of overextension in the border wars. Humans don't fight for glory, she'd said, her voice steady, eyes meeting each delegate without flinster. We fight to survive and we build to endure. Ignore that and you'll learn consequence the hard way. The Council had laughed it off, quaint mammalian bravado. Now, with Reyes's people vanished behind encrypted veils, the joke echoed hollowly. A sharp alarm pierced the air, red lights pulsing across the consoles. Voss slammed a fist down, pulling up a fractured signal. Incoming, Krell signatures massing at the relay point. They're probing our weaknesses, drawn by the warp echoes. We have hours, maybe less, before they overwhelm the fleet. Lyra's talons scraped the armrest as she leaned forward. Options? We can't evacuate the colonies without stable drives. Kaler glanced at the empty human seat, a void that felt heavier by the day. Gritting his resolve, he activated the emergency comms array. We adapt. Voss, jury-rigged the auxiliary reactors. Use the Vortian crystal matrices to dampen the surges. Lyra, rally the inner council for a defensive perimeter. No more waiting for miracles. Voss nodded, already splicing conduits, sparks flying as he worked. But as Kaler watched the engineer improvise, a flicker of doubt gnawed at him. Human ingenuity had always seemed so effortless, cobbled solutions from scrap and sheer will. Without it, their cleverness felt like grasping at shadows. The Krell would come relentless, and in the silence that followed humanity's withdrawal, the Council would face not just defeat, but the bitter truth of what they'd severed. Lyra caught his eye, her gaze steady. This is our chance to prove we're more than our hubris. Send the message to the human blackout zone, not demands but an admission. Maybe they'll hear us yet. Kaler hesitated, then keyed the transmission. Words of apology, of need, beamed into the void. As the signal faded, the chamber braced, the weight of impending battle settling like dust after a storm. The drives groaned back to life under Voss's hands, but the instability lingered, a reminder that some bridges, once burned, left scars that time alone couldn't heal. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the bridge's consoles a faint vibration through the deck plating. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer sensors, showing the swirling nebula that had become their reluctant sanctuary. 3 weeks since the Council's blockade, and the Endeavor as supplies were thinning, ration packs down to emergency levels, air recyclers straining against the crew's labored breaths. She glanced at Lieutenant Rao, his fingers dancing over the tactical display, eyes narrowed in that familiar mix of defiance and exhaustion. Any change in their patrol patterns? Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Rao shook his head, not looking up. Same as yesterday, Captain. 3 destroyers looping the perimeter, probes sweeping every hour. They're not letting up. Ensign Lila Chin, the youngest on the bridge at 24, leaned forward from her station. What if we try the Ghost Protocol again? Modify the emissions to mimic a derelict. We've got the power reserves for one more shot. Ilara considered it, rubbing the scar on her jaw, a souvenir from the first skirmish with the Council's enforcers. The Ghost Protocol had worked once, slipping them through a gap in the net, but the aliens had adapted fast. Their tech scanned deeper now, sniffing out biosigns. Still, doing nothing wasn't an option. The crew needed hope, and action was the only currency left. Prep it, Ilara said finally. But integrate the new baffles we jury-rigged from the cargo bay panels. If it fails, we pivot to the asteroid field, full burn. The bridge buzzed with quiet efficiency. Rao coordinated with engineering, his voice clipped over the comms. Lila's hands flew across her console, tweaking algorithms born of late-night brainstorming sessions. Ilara watched them, her mind drifting to the transmissions they'd intercepted. The Council's smug decrees, painting humanity as reckless upstarts who needed guidance. Silence had been their response. No pleas, no counterarguments. Just evasion, survival. It was teaching the bastards something, even if they didn't realize it yet. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing. Psiop inbao zaobaka. 2 minutes to intercept. Ilara's heart rate spiked, but she kept her tone even. Execute Ghost Protocol. Now. The ship shuddered as fields activated, cloaking their signature in a veil of fabricated debris echoes. Lila monitored the output, sweat beading on her forehead. The probe's signal grew stronger on the display, a predatory arrow cutting through the nebula's glow. They're adjusting, Lila whispered. Scanning for harmonics. Ilara clenched her fists. If this backfired, the probe would tag them, summoning the full fleet. No more running. But Rao's voice cut through, baffles holding. It's buying us time, diverting to the false echo. The probe veered, its path arcing away into the void. Relief washed over the bridge, short-lived. Ilara knew it was a reprieve, not victory. Helm, plot course to the asteroid field. Quiet as a whisper. As the Endeavor slipped toward the jagged rocks, Ilara activated the encrypted log. Day 23. The Council's tightening the noose, but we're not breaking. Humanity doesn't beg, we endure. And they'll learn what that means. Below decks, in the dim-lit mess hall, Dr. Marcus Hale nursed a cup of recycled water, his thoughts on the samples from the nebula, exotic particles that could revolutionize their drives if they ever got out. He overheard the crew's murmurs. fatigue setting in, whispers of surrender. But he pushed it down, sketching modifications on a battered datapad. Ingenuity wasn't optional, it was oxygen. The ship banked into the field, asteroids tumbling like silent guardians. Ilara's plan hinged on using the debris as cover, slingshotting to the neutral zone. But as they wove through the chaos, a new signal pinged, not Council but something older, a relic beacon buried in the rocks. "Captain," Lila called, "it's human. Pre-colony era. Coordinates match an old survey probe." Ilara's eyes lit up. "A wild card. Lock it in. If it's got data, it might give us an edge." They closed in, the beacon's faint pulse guiding them past a massive boulder. But the asteroid shifted unnaturally, a low rumble building. "Gazavitan anomali zawuna." "This field's unstable, could be a trap." Too late. A chunk of rock the size of a frigate broke free, hurtling toward them. Ilara shouted, "Evasive. Full thrusters." The Endeavour lurched, engines screaming as they dodged the projectile. Alarms wailed, hull breach in auxiliary storage. Air hissed out, precious oxygen lost to the void. Lila sealed the compartment, her face pale. "We took a glancing hit. Losing pressure." Ilara assessed, mind racing. The beacon was close, embedded in the next cluster. Retrieve it or retreat. Retreat meant circling back under pursuit. Helm steady on target. Rao, suit up a team. We're getting that probe. As the away team prepped, the ship shuddered again, another rock grazing the shields. Tension coiled like a spring. Marcus volunteered for the team, his scientific curiosity overriding caution. If it's survey data, it could map a safe exit. Ilara nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. This was the cost of silence. Pushing limits, risking everything for a scrap of advantage. The Council thought they could starve them out, force compliance. But humans thrived in the margins, turning desperation into defiance. The airlock cycled. Marcus Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the faint hum of the ship's life support systems underscoring the tension in the bridge. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer sensors, showing the nebula's swirling gases like a predator's maw closing in. Her crew, 3 humans, battle-hardened and quiet, watched her expectantly. Jax, the engineer, wiped grease from his hands, his usual grin absent. Mira, at navigation, chewed her lip, fingers hovering over the console. And Tomas, the comms officer, stared at his silent panel, the Council's last transmission a ghost in the logs. "We hold position," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The plan from the last jump had been simple. Slip through the nebula's edge, evade the Council's patrol drones, and link up with the remnant fleet. But the nebula's interference had scrambled their drives, leaving them adrift in a soup of ionized particles that played havoc with every system. One wrong burst from the thrusters, and they'd light up like a beacon for the alien hunters. Jax leaned over his station, muttering curses as he rerouted power. "Cap, the containment field's at 62%. If we push the engines now, we risk a cascade failure. Could vent the whole core." His hands moved with practiced grit, splicing cables that sparked faintly in the dim light. Ilara nodded, eyes fixed on the nebula's heart, a pulsing vortex of purple and gold that seemed to whisper threats. The Council had branded humanity's silence as surrender, a quiet admission of defeat after the blockade. But it was strategy, a veil to regroup, to strike from shadows. Now, with their ship, the Endurance, snared here, that silence felt like a noose. Mira broke the quiet. "Incoming signature, Council probe, bearing 240 Mark 7. It's probing the fringes, but if it vectors our way." She trailed off, plotting an evasion curve that twisted like a knife in Ilara's mind. "Jam it," Ilara ordered Tomas. He activated the countermeasures, a low-frequency pulse that mimicked natural nebula noise. The probe's blip hesitated on the screen, then veered off, but not before grazing their hull with a scan beam. Alarms chirped softly. "They're learning," Tomas said, his voice laced with weary admiration. "Adapting to our tricks. That thing almost pinned us." Ilara stood, pacing the narrow bridge. The air smelled of ozone and recycled sweat, a reminder of weeks evading the Armada. Humanity's grit had kept them alive this long, clever hacks, shared rations, unyielding trust. But the stakes climbed with every dodged bullet. Lose the endurance and the fleet's morale shattered. Worse, the Council's illusion of control solidified. "Jax, what's our window?" she asked. He glanced up, brow furrowed. 15 minutes before the field drops below safe. We improvise or we fry. Alara's mind raced, sifting options. The original plan, microjumps to skirt the nebula, had backfired when the first one stranded them deeper in. No, they needed adaptation, something the Council wouldn't anticipate from primitive humans. She eyed the auxiliary base schematics on her datapad. Mira, plot a slingshot trajectory using the nebula's magnetic eddies. Low power, ride the currents like a sail. Myra's eyes widened. That's uncharted. Could shear us apart. Or sling us clear. Alara met her gaze. We adapt or we die silent. Jax grunted approval, already tweaking the inertial dampeners. Tomas fed the probe's path into the sims, his fingers flying. The bridge thrummed with purpose, the crew's camaraderie a quiet fire against the void's chill. As the ship shuddered into motion, the nebula's gases parted like reluctant curtains, revealing a fleeting gap. But the probe circled back, its signal sharpening. Alara braced, the cost of failure heavy. Not just the ship, but the message humanity refused to let die. The Council would learn consequence, one hard-won escape at a time. The Endurance dipped into the eddy, hull groaning as magnetic forces tugged. Jax hooped as the field stabilized at 55%, his quick fix holding. Mira steered with precision, the ship dancing on the nebula's whim. Tomas jammed the probe again, buying seconds. They burst through, stars wheeling into view but not unscathed, a gash in the outer plating vented atmosphere, a tangible scar. Alara exhaled, the bridge erupting in muted cheers. The fleet's beacon pulsed ahead, a promise. Yet the nebula's glow lingered on the screens, a warning that silence bought time, but consequence demanded payment. Captain Alara Voss gripped the console edge, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The void outside the viewport was a black canvas pricked by distant stars, but the real threat hummed through the hull, a cascade of microfractures from the Council's sabotage drone. Her team, down to 3 now after the ambush on Rigel Station, moved with the quiet efficiency born of too many close calls. "Seal that bulkhead, Jax," she said, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. Jax, the wiry engineer with a perpetual squint from years in engine bays, nodded and yanked the lever. Sparks flew but the hissing stopped. He wiped his face with a grimy sleeve, his usual quip dying on his lips. No time for wit when the air recyclers were failing. Lyra, the xenobiologist, hunched over her scanner in the corner, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. Her cautious nature had saved them before, spotting the hidden toxin in the Council's peace offering, but now her eyes widened behind her visor. The fractures are spreading. If we don't vent the auxiliary pod, it'll breach the core in 10 minutes. Alara met her gaze, the weight of command settling heavier. The Council had pushed humanity to this edge, their endless demands for resources and submission finally met with silence. No more envoys, no more trades. Just withdrawal, a void that left the galaxy's power brokers scrambling. But silence had a price. Their ship, the last human vessel in neutral space, carried the proof in its cracking frame. Options? Alara asked, scanning the readouts. The plan to slip past the blockade and reach the outer colonies had backfired spectacularly when the drone latched on. Clever adaptation was their only shot now. Jack straightened, his brave streak shining through the fatigue. We improvise a patch with the spare hull plating. Risky, but it'll buy us time to jump. He glanced at Lyra. Unless your scans picked up something I missed. She shook her head but then paused, zooming in on an anomaly. Wait, the drone signal is echoing. It's not just sabotage, it's calling reinforcements. If we vent the pod, we might disrupt it. Alara's mind raced, piecing it together. Venting would mean losing their emergency supplies, stranding them further from home. But staying meant capture, and the Council's interrogations were legendary for breaking even the toughest. Do it, she decided. Jax rigged the charges. Lyra monitored the signal. As Jax dashed to the pod controls, the ship groaned, a deep vibration rattling the deck. Alara felt the pull of the fractures, like invisible hands tearing at their world. Outside, the drone's faint glow pulsed, a council's eye watching. She activated the comms not to plead but to record. Humanity's silence wasn't surrender, it was a mirror, forcing the council to face the emptiness they'd sown. The pod ejected with a thunderous whoosh, debris scattering into the void. Alarms quieted, but the scanner beeped urgently, reinforcements inbound, closing fast. Jax returned, breathing hard. Patches holding barely. We jump now or never. Elara punched the coordinates for the nearest colony fringe, the engines whining to life. As hyperspace folded around them, she allowed a grim smile. The council would learn soon enough. The cost of underestimating human grit wasn't just loss, it was the echoing quiet that followed. The dim glow of the council chamber's holographic displays flickered like dying stars, casting long shadows across the ornate alien thrones. Elara Voss, the human envoy, stood at the center, her posture unyielding despite the exhaustion etching lines into her face. She'd been here for weeks now, ever since the silence began, humanity's deliberate withdrawal from the Galactic Accord, pulling back ships, tech, and trade in one coordinated hush. It wasn't rage or war, it was absence, a void that the Council of Worlds now clawed at desperately. Beside her, Crix, the avian diplomat from the Zorith Collective, paced with clipped wings fluttering in agitation. His feathers, usually a vibrant azure, had dulled to a mottled gray under the strain. "They won't budge," he muttered, his beak clicking sharply. "Your people, our people, the entire network grinds to a halt without those fusion regulators. We've lost 3 outposts already to power failures." Elara didn't respond immediately. She watched as the Council's latest proposal scrolled across the central holoscreen. Concessions on territorial claims, reparations for the botched mining expedition that had sparked this mess. But it was too little too late. The humans had learned the hard way that words from the Council meant nothing without teeth, after the aliens had seized a colony world under false pretenses, claiming it for greater good. Now the silence was the teeth. A low rumble echoed through the chamber as the doors hissed open. Thaler, the hulking reptilian engineer from the Vexery Alliance, lumbered in, his scales scarred from hasty repairs on failing grid lines. He carried a makeshift device in his claws, a jury-rigged bypass cobbled from scavenged parts. "It's holding for now," he growled, voice like grinding gravel. "But without human schematics, it'll fry in days. Your silence isn't just punishment, Voss. It's starvation." She met his gaze, her own eyes steady, the weight of billions behind them. "Starvation teaches quicker than lectures, Thaler. You took our world, ignored our warnings. Now feel what empty space really means." Crix stopped pacing, his taloned feet scraping the floor. "This isn't strategy, it's suicide. The rival fleets, those Scar Raiders, they're probing our borders already. Without human ingenuity bolstering our defenses, we'll fracture." Elara's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of intel her covert contacts had smuggled in. The Council's early plan to force a resumption of trade through blockades had backfired spectacularly. Human automated drones had simply rerouted supply lines through uncharted wormholes, leaving the aliens with ghost signals and barren docks. Now, with resources dwindling, whispers of mutiny rippled through the lesser species delegations. Thaler set the device down with a thud, sparks dancing from its edges. "I fixed your atmospheric scrubbers once, back when we thought alliance meant something. Show me how to adapt this for the core reactors, and maybe we salvage something." She hesitated, the earnest pull of camaraderie warring with the grit of resolve. Trust had been shattered, but survival demanded adaptation. Crossing to the holoscreen, Elara overlaid a partial schematic, not the full blueprint but enough to hint at the clever human twist. Modular shielding that repurposed waste heat into auxiliary power. "Watch," she said, her voice calm amid the rising hum of the machinery. As her fingers danced over the controls, the display bloomed with lines of elegant efficiency, a testament to human problem-solving born of necessity. Crix leaned in, eyes widening, while Thaler grunted approval, his claws itching to build. But outside, alarms blared faintly. Scar scouts had breached the outer perimeter, drawn by the Council's weakening signal. The silence had bought time, but consequence loomed, demanding they earn the bridge back or watch it burn. Elara straightened, the chamber's air thick with unspoken stakes. This adaptation might hold the line, but the real test waited in the void beyond. Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the holographic display flickered with incoming data streams. The bridge of the UNS Endurance hummed with a tense quiet, broken only by the soft beeps of failing systems. Her crew, Jax, the wiry engineer with a perpetual squint, Lena, the sharp-tongued navigator whose optimism had frayed like old wiring, and Dr. Harlan, the cautious xenobiologist who now paced with uncharacteristic urgency, watched the central projection. It showed the Council's armada, a glittering swarm of vessels closing in on the human colony worlds, their silence from the void now a weapon turned against them. "They're not responding to our hails," Lena said, her voice tight, fingers dancing over her panel. "We've broadcasted every frequency, every protocol. Nothing." Alara nodded, her jaw set. The plan had been simple: humanity's enforced silence, a calculated withdrawal after the Council's betrayal at Vega Prime, was meant to force reflection, to make them feel the weight of isolation. But the Council had twisted it, interpreting the quiet as weakness, launching preemptive strikes to secure human assets. Now, with the Endurance as the last relay outpost, the stakes pressed in like the hull under vacuum stress. Jax wiped sweat from his brow, his toolkit clanking against his thigh. "Shields are at 30%. If we reroute power from life support, we might buy time for the evac signal to reach the inner colonies." Harlan stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. "And risk the crew? We've already lost 2 scouts to their probes. This isn't just about survival, it's about what comes after. If we break silence now, we validate their aggression." The ship shuddered, a distant explosion rippling through the deck. Alarms blared briefly before Alara silenced them with a sharp gesture. She straightened, her brave resolve stealing the air. "We adapt. Jax, isolate the quantum core. Lena, plot a slingshot around the asteroid belt, use the debris as cover. Harlan, analyze their formation. Find the weak link." They moved as one, a camaraderie forged in the fires of too many close calls. Jax dove under the console, sparks flying as he jury-rigged the core, his witty mutter under his breath. "Council thinks they're hunters, we're the ones who built the traps," drawing a ghost of a smile from Lena. She adjusted the course, her cautious inputs weaving the Endurance through a hazardous maze of tumbling rocks, each near miss heightening the tension. Harlan's display bloomed with patterns, his voice steady amid the chaos. "Their fleet's synchronized, but the flank carriers are lagging, overloaded with troop deployments. If we target their comms array with a focused EMP burst." The silence had taught the Council nothing yet, it was time for consequence. "Do it. But make it count, we won't get a second shot." As the Endurance banked hard, engines straining, the viewport filled with the stark image of a Council dreadnought silhouetted against a fractured moon, its weapons priming with lethal glow. Jax's reroute kicked in, life support dimming to a chill, but the shields flared back to life just as the first volley scorched past. Lena's maneuver slung them into the belt's heart, rocks pummeling the hull like angry fists. Harlan uploaded the targeting data, his fingers precise. Firing in 3, 2. The EMP lanced out, a silent wave that rippled through the void. On the display, the flank carriers stuttered, their formations fracturing like ice under heat. But the dreadnought pressed on, undeterred, its main battery locking onto the Endurance. Alara's heart pounded. Evasive. All power to thrusters. The ship twisted, a desperate corkscrew that grazed a massive asteroid, shrapnel peppering their shields. Jax hooped from below, "Gotcha." As secondary systems stabilized. Yet the cost lingered. A red light blinked on the console, indicating a hull breach in the lower decks, sealing off quarters where 2 crew members had been stationed. Their faces flashed in Alara's mind, gone not to melodrama but to the raw bite of necessity. Lena glanced back, her eyes meeting Alara's. "We're through the belt. But they're regrouping fast." Harlan leaned in, his voice low. "The silence ends here. Broadcast the warning, let them know the cost of pushing further." Alara hesitated only a beat, then nodded. The comms crackled to life, her words cutting through the static. "Council vessels, this is Captain Voss of the UNS Endurance. Your advance ends now. Humanity's quiet was a lesson. Ignore it and face the storm." The response was immediate, a barrage that lit the stars, but the Endurance surged forward, clever adaptations turning the tide. In the wake, the council's hesitation bloomed, a crack in their unity. Yet as they limped toward the rally point, the breach's chill seeped through the ship, a tangible reminder that triumph always carried its shadow. The chamber's air hung heavy with the scent of scorched circuits and alien incense, the council's holographic thrones flickering like dying stars. Ilara gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white against the cold metal, as the final data streams poured in from the void. Kai stood beside her, his breath steady but his eyes sharp, scanning the readouts that mapped humanity's last stand. No words passed between them. The silence was their weapon now, honed over cycles of defiance. The lead counselor, Vexer, leaned forward in his seat, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. You presume much, human envoys. Your species' withdrawal from the Alliance, your so-called silence, has left sectors in chaos. Billions suffer without your ingenuity. His voice dripped with the calculated disdain of one who had never tasted true loss. Ilara met his gaze, unflinching. She had always been the cautious one, the planner who weighed every variable, but the weight of Earth's isolation had stripped away her hesitations. Chaos is the forge of consequence, she said simply, her voice cutting through the hum of the chamber. You integrated us, demanded our solutions for your endless wars, then discarded us when we asked for equity. Silence isn't absence, it's a mirror. Kai shifted, his witty retorts silenced for once by the gravity of the moment. He had been the spark, the one who jury-rigged alliances with scraps and sarcasm, but now his hands rested on the activation node, ready. The challenge had escalated beyond the initial resource embargo. The Council's retaliation had severed the hyperspace lanes, stranding human colonies in the dark. One wrong move, and those outposts would starve, their beacons winking out like forgotten embers. Vexer's mandibles clicked in irritation. Equity? You hoard your adaptive tech, your biological resilience. Share it or watch your worlds fracture. The holograms flared, projecting starving refugees on allied planets, a calculated ploy to evoke guilt. But Ilara saw the cracks. The Council's own fleets faltered without human-maintained engines, their vaunted unity crumbling under the strain of self-inflicted isolation. She nodded to Kai, who initiated the sequence. No grand speeches, no dramatic flourishes, just the quiet upload of the contingency protocols. The data wasn't a weapon, it was a key. Unlocking shared archives of human engineering feats, not for dominance but for replication. We're not hoarding, Kai murmured, his tone laced with that familiar edge. We're teaching. Adapt or perish, that's the consequence you ignored. Alarms blared as the streams integrated, the Council systems convulsing under the influx. Vexer rose, his form shimmering with outrage. This is sabotage. But it wasn't, it was revelation. The holograms shifted, revealing the truth. Humanity's silence had forced the galaxy to confront its dependencies. Allied worlds, once pawns, now mobilized with salvaged human designs, turning the tide against the Council's overreach. Ilara felt the tremor in the floor as the chamber's defenses powered down, the risk materializing in the form of venting plasma from overloaded conduits. They had to move. Kai grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the evacuation hatch, while Lyra, their third, the brave xenobiologist who had bridged species with quiet empathy, covered their retreat, her modified scanner disrupting the remaining guards. In the corridor beyond, explosions rocked the station, a tangible cost of their gambit. A bulkhead groaned, sealing off the pursuing enforcers, but not before Lyra took a glancing hit, her arm singed. She waved off their concern, grimacing through the pain. Worth it. They get the point now. As their shuttle detached, the station's silhouette receded against the nebula's glow, a single striking image of fragility amid the stars. The Council would rebuild, but changed, wary of silence's edge, respectful of consequence's bite. Earth waited in the shadows, its people resilient, their triumph earned not in victory's roar, but in the quiet reshaping of the cosmos. Kai glanced back, a wry smile breaking through. Think they'll invite us to the next summit? Ilara chuckled softly, the tension easing into something like hope. Only if they learn to listen first. The stars stretched ahead, vast and unforgiving but no longer alone.